What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and it is officially time to lock in for the 2025 fantasy football season. The goal is to have at least a video out every single day up until week 1. So we're going to kick that off by going through my top 40 running back rankings. We'll have probably my top 50 wide receivers coming out tomorrow, but splitting these guys up into different tiers, kind of just setting like the overall foundation for my rankings. These will definitely evolve, as we get closer to the season, but as of right now, these are my top 40 running backs. Would love to hear your thoughts. Who are you guys higher on? Who are you lower on? Let me know your reasoning in the comments. But let's just dive right into it here. We are going to start off in tier 1, and I think most people agree with the top 3 running backs. It is Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, I do have Saquon as my number 1 running back right now. I could see an argument for Bijan. Like, Saquon is coming off a season where he was the running back 1 in points per game, heading into a very similar situation. There could have been concerns about his receiving volume, potential touchdown upside. With the tush push, he was fine across the board, obviously was the running back 1 overall. I do think you could make the case that the usage he had last year, the fact that they went on that playoff run, like maybe you want the guy with less tread on the tires. Like, I do get that argument. So I could see that point. I'm still going to have Saquon here as my number 1 running back. Then I have Bijan Robinson. Just across the board, he is going to produce in pretty much all areas. He was top 5 last year in carries, targets, rushing yards, receiving yards, receptions, and target share. Should be on a solid offense, behind a solid offensive line. He is my running back 2 and certainly is RB1 overall upside. And then the last guy here is Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, he had some pretty interesting splits with and without David Montgomery. The first, I think, 14 games of the season, don't believe he missed any time. He was averaging 18.7 points per game with David Montgomery. So that's really strong production, like mid to high end RB1 fantasy numbers. But we look at the 3 games without David Montgomery, and he averaged 32.6 points per game, just went completely nuclear. And you look at the change in his overall usage, went from like almost 17 opportunities per game to 26. Now, I definitely think with Montgomery back healthy, he's going to be closer to the usage we saw when they were splitting. But it's also a weird situation where, like, you can't really put the toothpaste back in the tube. We saw how dominant Jahmyr Gibbs was. And now, obviously, Dave Montgomery is still a very solid running back. They don't want to run Jahmyr Gibbs into the ground. But I do think he's probably going to take a little bit of a larger percentage of the backfield than he has in his first 2 NFL seasons. Still going to have him behind Saquon and Bijan, who are like the clear-cut top dogs on their team. Don't have a David Montgomery type kind of taking usage. But Jahmyr Gibbs still in this tier 1 area. Then looking at tier 2, I kind of have 2 mini tiers within this tier. At number 4, I'm going to go with Christian McCaffrey. I know he's going to be polarizing. I know there are people who will have zero interest in drafting him pretty much like anywhere in a fantasy draft. And I get it, right? Injuries have been a huge issue. He's had 3 injury-riddled seasons where he's pretty much buried you if you drafted him. But in those last 7 years, he had the 3 really rough ones with injuries. The other 4, he was a top 2 running back in points per game. And if you're able to draft Christian McCaffrey like back end of round 1, early round 2, and he hits, like, he is just going to give you such a leg up over your league mates. Reports are that he's healthy. There's no guarantee, he holds up throughout the season. But if I'm going to be in a bunch of leagues, I want at least 1 share of Christian McCaffrey because he does carry that league winning upside. And then the other guy within this mini tier is Ashton Genty. He has a 3-down skill set, obviously a historic rushing season his junior year of college, but as a sophomore, extremely productive as a pass catcher. This is a wide open running back room. You have like the dust of Raheem Mostert. You have Sincere McCormick, Zamir White. Like, Ashton Genty is going to be the guy. Chip Kelly has historically run a very fast-paced offense. Also a pretty solid offensive core around him. Upgrade at the quarterback position with Geno Smith. You have Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, Jack Besh. So like some decent weapons. Offensive line is not great. Probably going to be a bottom tier unit. That is kind of, somewhat of a concern here, but I still think he's going to get volume. I think he's going to be involved as a pass catcher. And I know there's some risk in drafting a rookie running back. Like, you don't want the Bijan situation to happen where all of a sudden he's in like a 50-50 split with a Tyler Algier type. I just think that's kind of like an outlier usage season from someone with this type of draft capital. Plus, I don't think there's anyone that is as good as Tyler Algier on this current depth chart. So then also in tier 2, but like a minor tier break, I have Devon Achane as my running back 6, and he's had back-to-back really solid seasons, 17 plus points per game in both of them. And both seasons, it's kind of felt like he has left some stuff on the table. In 2023, his rookie season, he actually could have been like a 20 plus point per game guy. He had like some weird games with injuries where he'd play a few snaps and then was just not super involved. And then last year, it was the splits were very significant with Tua in the lineup versus Tua out of the lineup. In the 11 games with a healthy Tua, Devon Achane averaged 22.6 PPR points per game, like would have been in the running to be the running back 1 overall, but then unfortunately he really struggled, as did the entire Dolphins offense in those games where Tua missed. And I think what's interesting about Achane is he's really kind of showcased this ceiling in 2 different ways through 2 years into his NFL career. In year 1 as a rookie, it was just his insane efficiency. The dude averaged 7.8 yards per carry. Now he's probably like almost guaranteed to never hit that number again throughout his career, but just the fact that he could have that type of big play upside is wild. And then year 2, the efficiency really fell off, but he was extremely involved as a pass catcher, 87 targets, 78 receptions for 592 receiving yards. I truly do think Devon Achane has running back 1 overall upside. He can win with efficiency. He can win with his receiving usage. He can be that big play threat, run up the touchdowns, be involved as a pass catcher. I like him here as my running back 6. Then someone who's going to win in a very different way, we have Derrick Henry coming off a running back 4 season in points per game, averaged nearly 20 a game at 19.8. He was second in the NFL in carries, rushing yards, and touchdowns. The talking point for Derrick Henry, right, for a while now has been like, when is he going to fall off? Getting up there in age, so much tread on the tires. He has like significantly more usage or like opportunities than any other active running back. And the running backs that are close to him are like a washed up Zeke, guys like that. But like he just continues to chug along, delivers these really solid seasons. You might be wondering, like, he was just a running back 4. Why do I have him at running back 7? I think when you do factor in that potential risk of him falling off, I know some people think he's going to operate as a running back 1 forever, but when you do have that, potential outcome there, and then the fact that he's not going to be like a groundbreaking fantasy running back, right? Because he's just not going to have the receiving usage. And so if I have him running back 7 and he gets drafted running back 4, running back 5, and finishes there, it's not like I'm missing out a ton. He will be my running back 7. Then moving into tier 3, going to start off with Jonathan Taylor. And he had a really interesting, 2024 season. Was kind of underwhelming through his first 11 games of the season, averaging only 14 points per game, and then just went completely nuclear in his last 3, averaging over 30 PPR points per game at 30.8. I think it'll be interesting how like the quarterback situation kind of affects his usage. I think he probably has a higher ceiling with Daniel Jones at quarterback. You can make the case that the threat of Richardson's legs, could kind of boost his efficiency, but he's also going to lose out in the touchdown department, not going to be super involved as a pass catcher. For Daniel Jones, like maybe the efficiency isn't quite as great, but he's going to get more carries in the red zone, also potentially more involved as a pass catcher. So I do think he has the ability, we've seen it, where he could potentially finish as like a higher end running back 1. Doesn't have the same ceiling as some of those other guys, just because I don't think he's going to get that type of receiving volume. You're also just kind of hoping he can stay healthy, like what it was the 2021 season where he had that monster year. Since then, he's had like some ankle issues. He had the contract thing, a couple of years ago. So you're just hoping he can put it together and show more of what he showed in the last 3 games as opposed to his first 11. Then at running back 9, I have Bucky Irving, and he really kind of expanded his role over the last 7 games of the season. Went from 11.8 points per game in the first 10 games on 12 opportunities to 18.3 PPR points per game on 19 opportunities. I think one thing that might surprise some people with Bucky Irving is you kind of think of him as like the smaller running back, going to be super involved as a pass catcher, a third down guy, probably not really working in on the goal line. It was kind of the opposite. Like Rachaad White was the guy that was running more routes. He was their trusted third down back, primarily due to the fact that he is a very good pass blocker. But Bucky Irving had 12 goal line carries to Rachaad White's 3, so that really wasn't an issue. And I do think Bucky Irving has emerged as the clear-cut running back 1. They do have a new offensive coordinator coming in, but Bucky was so impressive. Typically, it's a little risky to like bank on these day 3 running backs retaining their jobs. Typically, like at some point, it kind of falls apart and they get replaced or the production dips. But I just think Bucky's a pretty solid bet here. Talented player on a very good offense. And I do just think he's the better overall running back compared to Rachaad White. Then my running back 10 is going to be Chase Brown. Obviously had a massive boost last year once Zach Moss went down. First 8 games of the season with a healthy Zach Moss, 11.3 points per game. Without Zach Moss, all the way up to 20.9. He carried a massive workload, 18.9 carries and 5.5 targets per game. The issue here with Chase Brown, like I kind of referenced with Bucky Irving, these day 3 running backs, not always the best bet, especially someone that's kind of buoyed up by projected volume. Like you're hoping he steps in and is just used like a total workhorse. Now he's not competing with like amazing competition. Zach Moss still on the roster, Samaje Perine they brought in free agency, Taj Brooks like a day 3 pick in the draft. So it's not like he's competing with a bunch of world beaters here. But if he does start to lose, third down snaps to a Samaje Perine, some goal line looks to a guy like Taj Brooks, like that could potentially be an issue here for Chase Brown. But obviously the upside's there, like being a 3-down workhorse attached to this Bengals offense. He could certainly end up being a higher end running back 1. Couple more guys in this tier. I have Josh Jacobs as my running back 11. Really strong year 1 with the Packers. I wasn't super high on him, had some concerns, but he ends up logging a 17.2 point per game season. Very involved in the red zone, 3rd in red zone touches, 4th in total touchdowns. Didn't even have like a monster opportunity share, 67%. That was 17th in the NFL. And like kind of expected that a little bit. LaFleur has been a guy where he doesn't want to force feed one specific running back, but Jacobs still got a lot of the valuable touches. They did have Marshawn Lloyd injured for like the entire season. He was someone who I thought was interesting heading into last year as like a potential handcuff, someone who could work into a committee, but like there's no way you can have any trust in him. He was a complete non-factor last year due to injuries. Josh Jacobs performed well. Like him here as a back-end running back 1. And then the last guy in this tier, I'm going to go with Breece Hall. And I was initially a little bit lower on Breece Hall, which is funny because I was very high on him over the last couple of seasons. I remember I ranked him like pretty recklessly high when he was coming off of the torn ACL. That definitely panned out last year or 2 years ago. Last year, pretty much everyone was high on him, and that unfortunately did not come together where he was pretty disappointing in 2024. But I just look at the skill set. I think he's a very talented all-around running back, can be a 3-down guy. And my initial concerns with this offense were like, all right, the Jets are going to be a lower tier offense. This is just not a great overall unit. You have Justin Fields, where typically you get these mobile quarterbacks and they're going to vulture near the goal line. You might get an efficiency bump, but you're also probably not going to be super involved as a pass catcher. But the more you look into it, Justin Fields is pretty willing to check down. We saw it a lot last year with the Steelers, and he was dealing with a pretty poor group of weapons. That's pretty similar to what he has here with the Jets, like outside of Garrett Wilson. And then in the red zone, I think Breece will be fine. But I do think Breece Hall can get involved as a pass catcher. I think the efficiency is going to be there with the threat of Justin Fields' legs. And I'm a believer in the talent. I think the situation is a little bit better than I initially thought, or maybe not quite as bad as I initially thought. So I will have him in my top 12 running backs. Then moving into tier 4, this is honestly a really tough tier to kind of work through. I think the running back position does have a pretty solid amount of depth this year. I'm going to start off with Amarion Hampton. Now, I will say right away here, it's very possible that Hampton does not score more fantasy points than almost like the vast majority of the guys within this tier, but I think he's going to be scoring the points when you really need them. And that's kind of something you see with these rookies pretty much like at every position, where they might start slow, they might be in a committee, they might be splitting routes, snaps, whatever it might be, but then they really take off over the second half of the season. And I do think that could be the case here with Amarion Hampton, where early on they did sign Najee Harris. He's been a volume sponge. He might be a nuisance through the first few weeks, maybe like first half of the season, but you don't draft a running back at pick 22 to sit him behind Najee Harris, who like you just randomly signed in the offseason. Like it would just make no sense. This is a team that wants to run the ball. I do think this will be a solid offense overall. He'll be running behind a very strong offensive line, has some receiving upside. I think Amarion Hampton, like I said, might be frustrating early on in the season. I don't even know if you'd feel great starting him as like a top 2 running back in your lineup in week 1. But I think over the second half, he could really just like blow everyone else in this tier out of the water. After Hampton, I'm going to go with Kenneth Walker. And I've been a little bit lower on Kenneth Walker than consensus over the last couple of seasons. And it's kind of just felt like every year has been somewhat underwhelming, where it seems like there was more meat left on the bone, that just like things did not come together. And it kind of felt that way last year too. Like, he was a monster early on in the season, was averaging like over 20 points per game through 5 games, scored at least 14 fantasy points in all 5 of those. And then he finishes as the running back 12 in points per game, which is still fine, but when you needed him, he was not coming through. Last 6 games he played, he did not hit 14 PPR points a single time. Now, I think the most interesting part about his usage last year was the uptick in receiving. That had been the big issue for Kenneth Walker, where he didn't catch passes in college. Typically, running backs who don't catch passes in college, they don't magically become these like super solid receiving backs in the NFL. And he wasn't super involved as a pass catcher in year 1 and year 2, but we saw a big leap last year. Unfortunately, to go along with that bump in receiving usage, the efficiency really kind of fell off. They're not really playing around here with Seattle, made a lot of changes on the offense, new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, new group of weapons, but this is still a pretty rough offensive line, which is the main concern. But like, I have him at running back 14. You can see how maybe the run game is better, changing up the coaching staff, and he was the running back 12 last year. So I think this is a fair spot for Kenneth Walker. I'm definitely kind of coming around on him heading into 2025. Someone who I'm going to be lower on than consensus is Kyren Williams. This really just comes down to the fact that I don't want to bet on Kyren Williams. I faded him last year. I was incorrect, but I'm going to be doing the same thing this year unless he gets like a solid extension. If they commit to him long-term, then I'll definitely change my tune here. But he's been used as a workhorse running back in back-to-back seasons. And it just comes down to the fact that I don't think he is efficient enough or just like great enough as a player to justify continuing to give him that type of usage. He was not overly efficient on the ground last year, 0 rushing yards over expected per attempt. He wasn't anything special in terms of his efficiency as a pass catcher, also had some fumbling issues, lost 3 of them, fumbled 5 total times. And then the Rams have spent solid draft capital at running back in back-to-back seasons. That was my big thing last year, where it's like, you spend solid, draft capital on Blake Corum, you'd think he'd be involved. He was not involved, but then they run it back with a round 4 pick on Jarquez Hunter, and it's like, what's the point of drafting these dudes if you're just going to force feed Kyren Williams? Just doesn't make a ton of sense. So I do think we're going to see Kyren Williams kind of take a hit. And with Sean McVay, we have seen he's been a little bit erratic with how he uses his running backs. One week a guy could be the workhorse. The next week, they're just a complete non-factor. And so I do feel like the floor could kind of fall out here with Kyren Williams. And I just don't really want to be caught holding the bag. I'm willing to accept like I might be wrong like last year, but if the wheels fall off, I don't want him on my roster. So he will be my running back 15. Then I have James Cook. Some people might also think this is low. He was the running back 11 in points per game last year. But when you look at his overall usage and how he scored his fantasy points, I do feel like that running back 11 season is probably pretty close to his ceiling just in this current situation. He had the 25th highest opportunity share, so very, very low. That's not typical like fantasy running back 1 usage. He scored 18 total touchdowns. 18 touchdowns on a team where you had Josh Allen also getting into the end zone a ton, doing the tush push. Like, he scored the second most touchdowns, wasn't, some sort of like crazy heavily used dude on the goal line. Like I said, 25th in opportunity share. And so I do think running back 11 is pretty close to his peak outcome. I think he falls back down to like a middle tier running back 2 option. Then my running back 17 is going to be Chuba Hubbard. Really dominant down the stretch last year. In his last 13 games, averaged 18.1 points per game, had a 78% opportunity share, which was 5th in the NFL, was averaging over 20 opportunities per game. Jonathan Brooks going to be out for this entire season. They did add Rico Dowdle and Trevor Etienne, so you could talk yourself into being concerned about some of this competition, but head coach Dave Canales has been very willing to use a workhorse. We saw it with Rachaad White in 2023. We saw it with Chuba Hubbard last year in 2024. So I think drafting him as like a mid-tier RB2 is a very fine price to pay. Then at running back 18, I have RJ Harvey. And I could see some people not liking this, thinking this is a little bit too high. I've definitely seen some of like the J.K. Dobbins running back 1 chatter where they think Harvey's going to be like the depth option. The backup here When we just kind of look at the facts, like the Broncos pretty much reached, like people did not think RJ Harvey was going round two. They reached to draft him in round two. That is significant draft capital for a running back. Dobbins is unsigned like through free agency until after the draft. He had not been picked up by a team. His own team that he had a lot of success with last year opted to sign Najee Harris for like I think almost close to twice the money than J.K. Dobbins got, and he gets a 1-year, $2.7 million contract. So this is not me trying to dump on J.K. Dobbins. I think he's a very good player, but he is not the future here at the running back position for the Broncos, and he's also just been really unable to stay on the field. It's really been a bummer because every time he's been able to get on the field, he has looked good, but then he just continues to deal with these injuries. And so I think J.K. Dobbins is going to be involved. Like you look at RJ Harvey, he was never going to be a 3-down workhorse. I think this Dobbins signing says a lot more about how they view Audric Estime than how they view RJ Harvey. And once again, like this could be something frustrating early on where Dobbins is the veteran, he's the lead back in the first half of the season, but Harvey is going to produce for fantasy through efficiency, through big plays. This is a backfield I want to be a part of. I know it went terribly last year, but it was just a very, very gross running back room. I think RJ Harvey could be someone who's a league winner peaking towards the end of the year, and that's why I have him here as the running back 18. Now, someone who I think might be kind of the opposite is Alvin Kamara, who I have at running back 19. I think a lot of people probably aren't going to like this. The dude was the running back 5 in points per game in 2024, and I talked about how RJ Harvey, like Amarion Hampton, these younger, rookie running backs, could be guys that really peak towards the end of the season in the fantasy playoffs. Alvin Kamara has been the opposite, where he has been very impactful in like getting your season started off right, potentially building up that record to get into the playoffs. But when you've needed him to go out there and win your leagues, he has not shown up over the last few years. In the last 3 seasons, from weeks 1 through 9, he is averaging over 20 PPR points per game. From weeks 10 through 18, that falls all the way down to 13.6. He is going to be 30 years old. You have a new coaching staff coming in. This is projected to be a bottom 5 offense. You can certainly see the path where he just continues to get peppered with targets. This is not a strong running back room, and he produces, but you can also see the floor kind of falling out here with Alvin Kamara. And if I'm making a bet, like I'd rather just bet on like the young, explosive, big play threat on a very good offense in RJ Harvey compared to Alvin Kamara, who could really tail off like he has over the past few seasons. I actually think if you're drafting at the running back position, like it could make some sense to potentially pair these guys on the same roster where you have Kamara to give you that boost early on in the season, and then you're banking on RJ Harvey to kind of take you home over the second half. Then at running back 20, I have Joe Mixon. He was the running back 9 in points per game last season. Similar to Kamara, kind of fell off over the second half. First 8 games, averaged 22.6 points per game. I mean, looked like he was going to be a total league winner. Then in the last 6, falls all the way down to 10 points per game and is like almost becoming like unplayable in your lineup. Throughout his entire career, he has been a very volume dependent running back. And that was the case last year with the Texans. Some of the issues here, though, this is a very, very bad offensive line. It caused them some problems last year. The efficiency really took a hit in that like last 6 games. And then they've also added some competition like Nick Chubb. I don't really know what he is at this stage in his career. Probably a non-factor. But they also added Woody Marks, who like they spent decent draft capital on. I believe they traded a day 2 pick, I think like this upcoming year's round 3 pick to draft him. So that's not nothing. And I just think if you have concerns about the efficiency and he's someone who has relied on that volume, I think there are ways where some other running backs can kind of, eat into that workload that you'd like him to dominate. And then I think this is the final player in this tier. Yeah, we have James Conner, who was the running back 15 in points per game last year, just kind of quietly putting together very strong season after season. He's averaged at least 15 points per game in 4 straight years. Solid usage, almost 15 carries a game, 3.5 targets. You're just kind of hoping he can hold off Trey Benson, who's, their younger day 2 pick running back from last year. But they extended James Conner. He was productive last year. Unless he starts to fall off as a player, feel pretty good about him holding on to that starting spot. Now, moving into tier 5, we're going to have like a 2 mini tiers within tier 5. But I'm going to start off with Travion Henderson. Now, similar to the other rookies I've talked about, you can certainly see the path to like gross split, especially early on. You have Ramondre Stevenson, you You have Antonio Gibson, but early round two capital is significant for running backs. He's also like the new coaching staff's guy where they like had to inherit Ramondre Stevenson, Antonio Gibson. That's not to say they don't like those dudes, but they felt, I guess good enough about Henderson or poor enough about the other running backs to go out there, draft him with an early round two pick. And similar to RJ Harvey, Henderson was never going to be this like monster workload, workhorse guy. He is a big play running back, great third down back, really strong pass catcher, great pass blocker on an ascending Patriots team. And so not only could he be one of these rookies that like really kind of pulls away towards the end of the season, but that could also just be the case here for this Patriots offense overall, led by a year two Drake May, could definitely be a team and player that are peaking in the second half. Then at running back 23, I have DeAndre Swift. Now, admittedly, this does feel kind of gross. If you told me like right after the 2024 season, I'd have him this high, I would have told you were crazy, but he has just managed to dodge like all potential competition here throughout this offseason. You could have seen them bringing someone in for agency. You heard talks about like, are they signing Nick Chubb? Are they signing J.K. Dobbins? Seemed like they were interested in drafting Travion Henderson. And we head into the season here, head into camp with Roschon Johnson as the running back 2 on the depth chart, and then their late day 3 pick, Kyle Monungai, as the running back 3. And then even though Swift has had like some frustrating, kind of underwhelming seasons, he has been a top 24 running back in points per game in all 5 years. He was the running back 21 last year, and you have to think this Bears offense is going to be much improved. And so although it feels gross, I'm going to have Swift here as my running back 23. Then I have a former Bear at running back 24 with David Montgomery. Now, he was the running back 16 in points per game last year. Like I kind of mentioned with Jahmyr Gibbs, I do think we're probably going to see Gibbs take a bigger piece of the pie. So would expect, a little bit of a dip in Montgomery's production. Also, the offensive line took a hit this offseason. Ben Johnson leaving, I do think is going to be a hit to this offense. It's still going to be a great unit, but like you had 2 very, successful running backs for fantasy. I feel like David Montgomery is going to be more in like that fringe RB2 range as opposed to someone who's pushing as like a high-end running back 2. But for David Montgomery, he has the unique upside where if Jahmyr Gibbs goes down with an injury, all of a sudden David Montgomery is probably like a weekly top 5 running back, and just no one else in this range has that type of upside, right? Like if Roschon Johnson gets hurt, it doesn't really do anything to DeAndre Swift. If like Trey Benson gets hurt, it doesn't do anything to James Conner because none of these dudes are like the running back 2 on their rosters. Dave Montgomery could step up. He has been a workhorse in the past. He does have that nuclear upside with a Gibbs injury. Then at running back 25, I'm going to go with Caleb Johnson. And typically when you're drafting rookies for fantasy, they are very high ceiling, low floor options where they could come in, be super productive right out of the gate, or they could just completely flop and be a non-factor. Caleb Johnson is the weird instance where he feels very high floor but low ceiling. Like it seems very clear what his role is going to be. He is going to be the early down back. He's going to be working in on the goal line. And then you're going to have Jaylen Warren more involved as like that receiving threat. It's not a great offensive situation. Like it's not a great O-line. I think overall this is probably going to be a bottom like half of the league offense in terms of scoring, all of that stuff. So like I think he's going to be productive. I think he's going to be playable. I think he's going to be someone that you might feel more confident starting week 1 than like a Travion Henderson or even like an RJ Harvey, but I don't think he has anywhere near the same upside as some of those other rookies. My running back 26 is going to be Aaron Jones. He was the running back 20 in points per game last year. Even without hitting in the touchdown department, he was top 10 in rushing yards, receiving yards, carries, targets, and receptions. The concern here is that he's 30 years old, kind of getting up there. You could see, some diminished production from him. And then they also added Jordan Mason as competition, who was, very productive in his stint with the 49ers last year. So if Aaron Jones can stay healthy, kind of hold off Jordan Mason, can certainly see him logging another running back 2 season. But you could also see where things could go wrong here and he potentially slips, like out of the top 24 running backs. Then at running back 27, I'm going to go with Tony Pollard. Kind of had a bounce back season last year, even though I think he actually underperformed what he did with the Cowboys in 2023. But like from a real life perspective, it was much better. He was just in a much worse offensive situation. He was the running back 22 in points per game last year. Really solid usage, had a 73% opportunity share. That was top 10 in the NFL. Is playing behind a solid offensive line, but still likely going to be a poor offense. Maybe Cam Ward comes in and lights it up, but like I certainly don't think that's like the median outcome here. With that type of usage, even if the offense isn't great, I still think he should be improving on his 5 touchdowns from last year. You do have Tajay Spears as like solid competition, solid running back too, but nothing we saw last year should lead us to believe that like they want to make this a super heavy split. Would expect Tony Pollard to step in here and continue to be the clear-cut running back 1. Then we have like the mini tier break here. And my running back 28 is going to be Quinshon Judkins. Probably going to be lower on him than consensus. I think just in terms of prospects, I was already lower on him. And then it's just not a great year 1 situation. Like you can paint yourself the picture where he has a 3-down skill set, could command a lot of volume, but like Vegas has them projected for I think the fewest points scored amongst all the teams in the NFL. That's not great. Does have some competition with like Dylan Sampson, Jerome Ford. Like I said, it was already kind of lower on him as a prospect, so maybe I'm more willing to see someone like Sampson or Ford just kind of being frustrating and eating into his usage, even though I also wasn't huge on Dylan Sampson. But like, so you can see he could be a volume sponge, get a lot of opportunities, even on a bad offense. But if he's not dominating the touches, like this is just not a great situation for a running back to be in. Then my running back 29 is going to be Isaiah Pacheco. Now, I think we could definitely look back on these rankings after the season, and Pacheco could have ended up being like a massive steal. Like you could be getting the clear-cut running back 1 for the Chiefs at like a mid-tier RB3 price tag. And you look at early on last year, like was productive through 2 weeks, 15.8 and 16.1 PPR points, but then he fractures his fibula, comes back, and then in his last 5 games of the regular season, didn't hit 10 PPR points in a single one of them. This is kind of a crowded running back room. Like you don't have studs in here, but like Kareem Hunt kind of took the starting spot from him, or didn't give it back after he came back from injury. You have Elijah Mitchell, who might be nothing, but, was productive at one point. I do really like their rookie Brashard Smith. I think he's going to be more of like a receiving Jerick McKinnon type, so not necessarily like taking from the pie of Isaiah Pacheco here, but so you could see where this is gross. You got a lot of running backs involved, but if Pacheco can get back to the form he had 2 years ago, early on, first couple of weeks in 2024, you could certainly see him being a really solid pick. And then RB30, I have Brian Robinson. He's a very safe pick, but also just very, very low upside. He's going to be an early down running back on a really strong, probably like potential top 5, top 10 offense, rushing behind a solid offensive line, but he just has no receiving upside. He's playing with a mobile quarterback who will vulture touches. And so he probably peaks if he hits in the touchdown department as like a back end RB2. If not, he'll be like a fine running back 3, but you're just probably never going to feel great about starting Brian Robinson because he could just give you those games where he might have 16 carries for 80 yards, which from a real life perspective is great. But if he doesn't catch any passes and he doesn't get into the end zone, that's just not really doing much for you. And then the final tier here, we have tier 6, also a tier that's going to have like a mini tier break. So in the first, I guess like 6A, we have Cam Scatterbo, Travis Etienne, Bashal Tutin, Jordan Mason, Jalen Warren, and Tyrone Tracy. So we'll start off with these Giants running backs here. This is going to be potential gross split, an ambiguous backfield. We don't necessarily know at this point who is going to pull away. Tyrone Tracy, very productive last year, was a day 3 pick, but was certainly viable for fantasy. I would lean towards Cam Scatterbo winning this starting spot. I just think he's a little bit more versatile in the fact that like he is a huge running back, so you could see him filling in as like that early down bruiser, someone who could be used on the goal line. But he is also a very, very capable pass catcher. So there's lots of ways where he can produce. Plus, I think he does have that like overall 3-down skill set where maybe he just pulls away and is the clear-cut running back 1. Then we have the Jaguars backfield. And, initially after the draft, I definitely would have thought I'd prefer Bashal Tutin reports out of Jaguars camp do seem to imply that like Travis Etienne is looking like the running back one. Now it's really tough to evaluate because Travis Etienne early on in his NFL career looked like he was going to be a very solid running back. Last year was just really rough, like was pretty much benched or, outplayed by Tank Bigsby. And then they bring in this super explosive, like high upside player in Bashal Tutin. And so you can see both of these guys being super valuable. I'm going to be very high in this Jaguars offense. So one of these dudes probably is going to be a great pick. So I'm fine being invested in both of them. Then we have Jordan Mason. Like I talked about with Aaron Jones, Jones should be the running back one to start off the season. But if he gets hurt, if he's looking like dust, Jordan Mason could definitely be a really interesting option. I really like Jaylen Warren as a player. I just don't think the Steelers are all that into him. And so, like, maybe he's playable if this offense is better than expected, but like you're probably not going to trust him in your lineup as like more of a pass catching back. I don't know if he has that solid usage. Kind of has that handcuff upside where he could be a really strong option if Caleb Johnson were to go down. And then in this second kind of mini tier, I have Zach Charbonnet, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, and Tajay Spears. Zach Charbonnet is truly like an elite handcuff where if Kenneth Walker goes down, he is a big running back that you can just force feed. We saw it last year. He had like a few just like monster games with Kenneth Walker out of the lineup. Ramondre Stevenson could potentially be playable early on in the season, also has that handcuff value with Travion Henderson, very similar situation with Najee Harris. Maybe he's playable early on, probably going to lose, a lot of his usage in the second half of the season, but also handcuff upside. And then Tajay Spears, someone who's also like showcased some solid games when Tony Pollard has missed time. So handcuff, maybe you can talk yourself into him like working out some sort of like 60-40 committee where he could be playable in like a plus matchup. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 40. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Who should be higher? Who should be lower? If you watched all the way until the end, thank you. I appreciate it. Just do me a huge favor, hit that like button. And if you are not subscribed, subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy the video. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.